So this is going to be the last topic in the Fashion Math Refresh mini course. We're going to talk briefly about angles. Now, you could teach a whole course on angles. It would probably be called something like trigonometry, but for fashion math, we're going to keep things pretty basic. So let's start with a circle. As you are all probably aware, if you go all the way around a circle, we say that you will have gone 360 degrees. 360 degrees. I just went 360 degrees around this circle. This means that if you're standing in front of a room and facing the front, and then spin around 360 degrees, you end up facing the front of the room again. You spun all the way around. And incidentally, that little circle, that little Cheerio that hangs out above the zero there, that means degrees. So what if we want to go part way around the circle? For example, let's say we want to go halfway around the circle exactly. So if we go halfway around the circle, we're going to be going half of 360 degrees. So 360 divided by 2 is 180. So if we go halfway around the circle like this, if we go halfway around the circle, we will have gone 180 degrees. Which means if you stand facing the front of the room and you turn 180 degrees, when you're done spinning, you'll be facing the back of the room. Okay, so let's say that you only want to spin a quarter of the way around the circle. So if we're spinning a quarter of the way around a circle, that means we're going 1/4 of 360 degrees. So 1/4 of 360 degrees is 90 degrees. So that means if we start out here and we just go a quarter of the way around and stop right over here, we will have gone 90 degrees. This is not only the most familiar angle for most people, but it's the one that we are going to be focusing on. So this is a 90-degree angle, commonly known as a right angle. You could also say that when two lines form a 90-degree angle, that the two lines are perpendicular. So you can see this little square that's drawn in the corner here. Whenever you see a little square drawn in an angle, that designates that you're dealing with a right angle. So let's go over a few facts about right angles. First of all, you need two straight lines to make a right angle. If either of your lines are curved at all, if either of your lines are curved, then you can't make a right angle. And here's another thing you notice. So if you look at our big 90-degree angle here, and if we were to extend these two lines out like this and like this here, so it's like two lines intersecting, you see that all four of these angles that are formed by those two intersecting lines, they're all the same. They're all right angles and they're all the same. If the angles intersect and you see that the angles are not the same, like let's take this angle, here's a line, and here's a line. These two lines are intersecting, but this angle up here is clearly not the same as this angle here. So if you end up with two different sized lines in an intersection, then you don't have any right angles. So one thing that you can expect to encounter as a fashion major is something called pattern paper. And it will look something like this. Maybe not exactly, but in any case, it will be a grid of dots that will probably be spaced 1 inch apart. You can basically think of it as graph paper without the lines. So what does a 90-degree angle look like on pattern paper? Well, let me start by drawing a straight line here, or as straight as I can. I can't use a ruler while I'm drawing on the computer, but you, of course, will have a ruler. So here is a straight line. And what I want to do is, let me choose a point. This point right here, I want to draw a perpendicular line, a right angle to this first line through that dot. So I basically just go straight ahead. I follow the dots. Each time you get to a dot, you go to the next closest dot, and that will guarantee you a straight perpendicular line. So these lines are perpendicular, and like we said, when you make two lines at right angles like this, all four angles that you make are 90 degrees each. All right, well, there's one other angle we need to talk about. So suppose we wanted to cut this right angle, this 90-degree angle that's right here, exactly in half. So we'll draw that in a second, but first of all, if you're cutting a 90-degree angle in half, how many degrees is that? Well, let's go over here. So if we're cutting it in half and we're starting with 90, and we divide that into two equal pieces, that means that it's going to cut, if we cut a 90-degree angle in half, we'll end up with two 45-degree angles. So this is what this would look like. I can sort of eyeball it, and eyeballing the middle of things is possibly the easiest thing to eyeball. So if I come out like this, that's pretty close, but it's not exact. It's not exact. I could maybe move it down a little bit, but I'd still be guessing and maybe not quite getting it exactly. So here is how we're going to pull that off. Let's say that the right angle that we want to cut in half is part of a square. Now we know with any square or rectangle that if you connect the opposite corners, you're cutting the shape in half. So clearly with a rectangle, the angles are not being cut exactly in half. This angle here is obviously not the same as this angle here. And similarly in this other rectangle here, even though this triangle and this triangle, this half rectangle and this rectangle are exactly the same, the angles are clearly different. But with a square, if we slice it along the diagonal, and bear with me while I try to make a straight line here, if we slice this square along a diagonal, what we've made is two triangles that each have equal length legs. Since a square has four equal sides, this triangle up here has two sides that are equal. So if all four sides are equal, these two are definitely equal. And that means that these two angles also are equal. And for those of you who remember your geometry, this is something called an isosceles triangle. That won't be on the test. So this means when we cut a square along the diagonal, the 90-degree angles in the corners are cut exactly in half into two 45-degree angles. And that is clearly true all over the place. So let's go back to our pattern paper and start with this edge down here at the bottom. Now, suppose we want to draw a line at a 45-degree angle starting at the left-hand end of this edge. Well, before, we thought of a 45-degree angle as splitting a 90-degree angle in half. And even though we only have this one line here, this one edge along the bottom, we can imagine a vertical line here running along these dots. Remember, this grid is just like graph paper without the lines, and it's easy to imagine those lines. So this edge is also the edge of this small little square down here at the bottom. So if we connect the diagonals of the opposite corners of that little square, we should end up with a 45-degree angle. And if we want to extend our line, we just keep on connecting the opposite corners of each little square until the line is as long as we need it to be. Now, make sure that when you're connecting your diagonals that you do connect the opposite corners of a square. So if you look up here a little higher, I'm going to connect opposite corners, but you see here I'm connecting opposite corners of rectangles. So if we draw in our vertical and horizontal lines, we see clearly that I was not cutting this into 45 degrees because this angle here is much smaller than this other angle. So make sure that you're going to opposite corners of squares.